In 30 seconds, one document destroyed a career, exposed years of lies, and sent shockwaves through the highest levels of government. Kash Patel thought he was untouchable, until Pam Bondi proved him devastatingly wrong. Nobody anticipated the bombshell that morning. The congressional hearing was scheduled to commence at precisely 9:00 a.m. within the sterile confines of room 2141 in the Rayburn House office building. A dreary Tuesday with brooding clouds and persistent drizzle outside, the kind of weather that made everything feel oppressively heavy. Within the committee chamber, members gradually filtered in, most bearing expressions of weary routine, partially focused, partially eager for the day's conclusion. Pam Bondi entered quietly, scrutinizing notes on a slender legal pad. Her team had prepared relentlessly for days, triple-verified citations and organized documentation with meticulous precision. She spoke sparingly. Words were unnecessary. Her penetrating gaze communicated volumes. But the instant Bondi produced that crucial document, everything transformed. Kash Patel's expression shifted from arrogant confidence to sheer terror within heartbeats. The evidence clutched in her hands would uncover years of systematic deception that no one had managed to substantiate until this pivotal moment. If you're witnessing this dramatic revelation unfold, ensure you like and subscribe so you won't miss any developments on this explosive exposé that's sending tremors throughout Washington's corridors of power. For months, Kash Patel had been commanding headlines with audacious assertions that nobody could authenticate. The media amplified every declaration without scrutiny. Major networks allocated prime airtime for him to reiterate his narrative unchallenged. He had constructed a reputation as an influential insider, someone privy to Washington's darkest secrets. However, Pam Bondi, Florida's former Attorney General, had been silently accumulating evidence that would demolish everything. With her systematic prosecutor's intellect, she had been connecting patterns others overlooked, pursuing paper trails everyone else disregarded. While Patel generated noise on television, Bondi constructed an airtight case in absolute silence. Kash Patel occupied the witness chair, appearing supremely composed. His jacket was impeccably tailored, his tie a shade too audacious for the solemn room. He reclined leisurely, conversing casually with his attorney, smirking at some inaudible comment. On the desk before him, his nameplate gleamed beneath the harsh LED lighting. As attendees settled in, cameras from C-SPAN and various news outlets fine-tuned their focus. Microphones blinked crimson, chairs groaned softly. There existed that electrically charged silence preceding official commencement, the kind only noticeable when you're actively seeking it. Committee Chairman DuPont launched proceedings, reviewing the anticipated agenda. Patel was present to address inquiries regarding internal communications during a high-profile intelligence assessment that had generated considerable attention the previous year. Nothing sensational on the docket, merely an appearance to clarify discrepancies from earlier testimony, or so everyone assumed. The stakes couldn't have been more monumental. This transcended one individual's credibility. It concerned the very integrity of America's intelligence apparatus. The intelligence community had been questioning whether influential figures could operate beyond accountability and whether truth still held meaning in Washington. The initial exchanges were routine, dates, timelines, and procedural clarifications. Patel responded with unwavering confidence, speaking in measured, legally vetted phrases. Every utterance sounded rehearsed, like someone who had practiced their performance for countless hours. Bondi's opportunity arrived approximately 30 minutes into the proceedings. The chairman offered a brief acknowledgement in her direction, and she adjusted her microphone. "Mr. Patel," she began, her tone remarkably steady, "during your previous appearance before this committee, you testified under oath that you maintained no written correspondence with Mr. DeVellin regarding the March 14th briefing, correct?" Patel glanced sideways momentarily. "That's accurate," he confirmed, nodding decisively. "I believe that's precisely what I stated." Bondi remained focused on her notes. She reached down, opened a tab, and deliberately extracted a document from a compact folder. Nothing theatrical, no highlighting. Simply stark, unforgiving ink on pristine white paper. "I am formally entering into the record a memorandum dated March 13th, she announced, originating from your personal email account to Mr. Devlin's private address. It references verbatim specifics of that identical March 14th briefing." For a suspended moment you could hear someone shift uncomfortably behind the witness. Patel blinked rapidly. "The correspondence must be erroneously attributed," but Bondi continued reading, quoting directly. Each line struck like a calculated blow. The email was comprehensive, time-stamped, and carbon-copied to 2 additional staffers. Patel's signature adorned the bottom. As tension permeated the room, Chairman DuPont interjected, requesting clarification. Patel leaned toward his microphone, stumbling slightly, attempting to reframe the inquiry, but his rhythm was shattered. Bondi hadn't elevated her voice once. It was unnecessary. Every word carried substantial weight. "I'll proceed to my next question," she stated, "but this represents merely one of several discrepancies we've identified." Before she could continue, Patel raised his hand, his voice firmer this time. Something had unmistakably shifted in his demeanor. "With all due respect, Representative," he said, the word respect dripping with irritation, "that email doesn't accurately reflect what actually transpired. There's context you're overlooking." Bondi remained unfazed. "Then perhaps you can provide that context immediately," she replied, turning the page in her folder with deliberate, unhurried composure. "If someone on my team transmitted that draft and it was incorrectly attributed to me, you personally signed it," Bondi interrupted, maintaining her calm demeanor. "The signature matches 3 others we've archived from the identical address, same font, identical metadata. Would you prefer I read those into the record as well?" A murmur rippled through the gallery. For the first time Patel appeared uncertain, his jaw clenched, and he shifted restlessly in his seat. "I don't recall signing that document," he said hastily. "Fortunately, we don't rely solely on memory," Bondi replied coolly. Patel's attorney placed a firm hand on his arm beneath the table, a slight squeeze, a silent warning to cease speaking. Bondi's aide passed her another document, this one printed in vivid color. "This is a screenshot of your encrypted text exchange with Mr. Devlin," she announced, raising the document slightly. "The day following the memo, you referenced it directly. Quote, 'That memo's locked down and off the radar just like we discussed. Would you care to explain what that signifies?'" Patel laughed once, short and nervous. "You're seriously presenting screenshots now?" Bondi's expression remained unchanged. "Do you dispute the content?" "No. I'm asserting you're attempting to create a political spectacle from private, informal exchanges." "They were concerned a federal intelligence briefing," she stated plainly, "not a lunch order." The room tensed palpably. Even committee members who had been half-scrolling on their phones were now completely engaged. Chairman DuPont adjusted his glasses and glanced toward Patel's attorney, who had remained silent. The chairman cleared his throat meaningfully. "Mr. Patel, you may answer the question or invoke your Fifth Amendment rights, but I'll remind you this committee treats perjury with utmost seriousness." The word perjury lingered in the air like smoke after ignition. Patel clenched his jaw visibly. "There's no perjury," he declared through gritted teeth. "This is a character assassination, and frankly I refuse to sit here while you play political games." "You're not here because we enjoy games," Bondi said, her tone flat and unwavering. "You're here because something doesn't compute, and Americans deserve absolute clarity." Her words cut cleanly, measured, not aggressive, but devastatingly precise. Patel glanced at the chairman, then down at the table. "I've endured enough of this charade," Patel announced suddenly, louder than before. "You've clearly prejudged the situation, and I refuse to sit here while you cherry-pick private conversations for your own narrative." He stood abruptly, not storming this time, just cold and deliberate. His attorney followed, frantically gathering papers. The chairman called for order, his gavel striking 3 decisive times. "Mr. Patel, you are under oath and obligated to remain until formally dismissed by this committee." But Patel continued walking directly out of the room, pushing past a junior staffer who stumbled backward. In the hallway just outside room 2141, reporters scrambled to position themselves strategically. Cameras flashed as Patel stormed through the corridor, his attorney trailing behind, hissing urgent warnings that the microphones captured in fragments worst possible decision, contempt charges. Inside the hearing room, an eerie silence descended. Not tense, not relaxed, simply bewildered. He wasn't technically permitted to leave. The chairman had explicitly stated as much. Yet there he was, coat draped over his shoulder, pushing through the exit like abandoning a tedious podcast he didn't want to finish. For approximately 5 seconds, nobody moved. Then a whirlwind of activity erupted. Staffers whispered urgently among themselves. Reporters reached for their phones. Someone from CNN stepped out to contact the news desk. A local anchor from Sacramento was already conducting a live broadcast from the hallway with one AirPod in and her heels removed. As this chaos unfolded, one of Bondi's aides quietly slid a new folder across the table. When she opened it, her expression changed. Still composed, but with something more resolved in her jaw, something definitively determined. The entire hearing was about to take a much darker turn. "We're going to pause here," Bondi announced, her voice cutting through the commotion. "Not because we enjoy games, but because there's one additional document I must enter into the records." She nodded to her aide, who tapped a keyboard. On the screen behind them appeared a screenshot. Black background, white font, a text chain between Patel and someone saved in his phone as W staff line. The message read, "Make sure we don't mention it in email. If she asks, deny it completely. She won't follow up." The room fell absolutely silent. Even the photographers ceased clicking their shutters. One committee member leaned forward, adjusting his glasses as if he couldn't believe what he was witnessing. "This message," Bondi continued, "was transmitted approximately 2 hours after Mr. Patel's sworn testimony last December, where he stated under oath that all communications regarding the security protocol were properly documented through official channels." Outside, in the hallway, Patel's attorney paced frantically, 2 assistants flanking him. One on the phone, one typing furiously at a laptop. "Pruth." "Muzi must return," the attorney muttered. "Walking out like that on live television is damaging enough, but if she's got more evidence, he needs to get ahead of it immediately." "Where is he now?" one assistant asked. "Waiting in a vehicle 2 blocks away, says he needs a moment." "He doesn't have a moment," the assistant snapped, looking at her phone. "It's already trending nationwide." Inside the hearing room, Chairman Dupas conferred quietly with the committee counsel. After a brief exchange, he addressed the room. "This committee will recess for 15 minutes to allow Mr. Patel to return. His counsel has been informed that failure to return could result in contempt proceedings." For the next 15 minutes, speculation in the room and online reached fever pitch. Patel's dramatic walkout began trending within minutes. Cable news anchors scrambled to get legal analysts on air. Phones throughout the building buzzed with notifications. Exactly 14 minutes later, Patel returned. He didn't storm in this time. No theatrics, just a quiet entrance through the side door. His coat was off, his expression was hollowed out. No smirk, no snide remarks. Just the look of someone who had been told behind closed doors that the story had already escaped his control, and was now in the court of public opinion. Chairman Dupont tapped his gavel 3 times. "We resume today's hearing with additional evidence submitted by Representative Bondi." "Proceed." Bondi adjusted her microphone, her movements deliberate and unhurried. "What you are about to hear was recovered from an internal training session conducted over Zoom last year. Mr. Patel, while serving as a senior advisor, you hosted this meeting. During this session, you spoke about internal practices for communication and protocol. Is that accurate?" Patel didn't answer. His eyes darted to his attorney, who nodded almost imperceptibly. The chairman spoke again, his voice firmer. "Mr. Patel, please respond to the question." Patel's voice was flat, almost resigned. "If you claim it's from a session, I won't deny it." "Excellent," Bondi said. "Because we extracted a specific portion. It lasts 45 seconds. She nodded to her aide. The room darkened slightly as the audio clip began to play. Patel's voice filled the space, recorded casually and far more confident than the man now sitting silently under the harsh lights. Keep communications clean. If you've got anything that could even appear to cross the line, send it through Signal, never email. And if anyone inquires later, deny knowledge unless you're completely backed into a corner." A gasp rippled through the room. Not dramatic, but the kind you hear when people suddenly realize they've seen merely the tip of the iceberg and not its treacherous depth. Committee members exchanged meaningful glances. A woman in the back row covered her mouth with her hand. Bondi paused, letting the words sink in. Her aide clicked again. Another snippet played. "We're not documenting this material. That's how people get dragged into hearings. You want protection? Use private channels. You want risk? Go formal. Your choice." The audio quality was crystal clear. There was no ambiguity, no room for denial. In the hallway, a young intern watching from a screen in an adjacent room muttered, "Holy, she's got him cold." Patel looked down, all fight drained from his body. His shoulders slumped forward. His attorney whispered something urgently in his ear, but he didn't respond, didn't even acknowledge the words. For the first time, he looked like someone who realized the game was definitively over. Chairman DuPont leaned forward, his expression grave. "Mr. Patel, that voice, is it yours?" Patel swallowed hard, the motion visible even from across the room. "Yes," he said quietly, the word barely reaching the microphone. "Do you retract any of those statements?" There was a long pause. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. Patel's attorney placed a hand on his client's arm, but Patel shook it off. "No." The single word landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples through the hearing room. Several phones lit up as staffers rushed to text the admission to their bosses or reporters. Bondi leaned in, her voice steady but with an unmistakable edge of moral certainty. "Then let the record show these were not just offhand remarks. These were instructions from someone with clearance, from someone who knew better, someone who understood exactly what they were doing when they systematically undermined transparency requirements that exist to protect our democratic institutions." Patel said nothing. His eyes, once sharp and challenging, now stared blankly at the table before him. "Would you care to explain why you gave these instructions?" Bondi pressed, not aggressively but persistently. After a moment, Patel looked up. "I was following a playbook," he said, his voice hollow. "One we all understood, one that worked." A ripple moved through the room. Bondi's fingers tensed around her pen. "And who is we, Mr. Patel?" she asked. Patel didn't respond immediately. His attorney leaned in and whispered something, but Patel seemed beyond caring about legal consequences. "The policy team," he said finally. "At least 5 of us. And were you instructed to keep those communications off the record?" His voice dropped so low the microphone barely captured it. "Yes." "By whom?" He shook his head slightly. "I'd rather not say here." Bondi didn't push, not yet. But the hearing room had transformed completely. The energy had shifted from spectacle to consequence. Outside, cable news anchors were visibly stunned on live television. Headlines had already updated. "Patel admits, we followed a playbook to hide communications." The chairman gavelled again, his face grim. "This hearing will enter an extended review phase. All testimony will be forwarded to the Oversight Committee, and legal counsel will coordinate with the Department of Justice regarding potential perjury and obstruction charges." And just like that, the story shifted from scandal to criminal investigation. Within hours, the hearing clips went viral. News trucks fired up their satellite feeds. Inside the Capitol, Bondi leaned toward her aide, Brenda. "We weren't even looking for that clip," she whispered. "It came in anonymously." Brenda blinked. "Someone sent it?" "No," Bondi replied. "Someone wanted it found, but that was the part that changed everything. Because whoever leaked the audio knew the storm it would cause and sent it anyway." It started 2 weeks earlier, in a building just 4 blocks away from the Capitol. An aide named Melinda Kash, 28, sharp-eyed and always 2 steps ahead, had been working in the basement archive of the Intelligence Subcommittee staff wing. Her job wasn't glamorous. Mostly it involved cross-referencing old transcripts, flagging duplicate entries and refiling years of clutter that no one else wanted to touch, but she had a habit. She listened. One afternoon, she had overheard two staffers talking about a ghost drive, a pocket-sized USB no one could officially admit existed. They joked about it in passing, one of them even laughed. But Melinda didn't laugh. She noted the name One Staff Line. She went back through older entries, tracing emails where that code name popped up in metadata. They weren't frequent, barely more than 4, but they all pointed to one inbox. Patel's. That was the thread she tugged, and when she did, the whole sleeve came apart. Melinda didn't tell anyone, not her supervisor, not her roommate. She just compiled what she could, quietly verified it, and placed a printout inside an unmarked envelope. It sat in her apartment for 4 days before she finally walked into Representative Bondi's district office on her day off and handed it to a man sitting at the front desk. All she said was, "Give this to her, no one else." As the media tore through every second of the hearing, as Patel's name trended alongside phrases like cover-up and perjury, something else was happening beneath the surface. Quietly, deliberately, pieces were moving that most people would never see. In a small apartment in D.C., Melinda Kash returned to her quiet routine, still sorting files, still walking past people who had no idea what she'd done. She didn't want recognition, didn't care about cameras. What she wanted was for people to do their jobs right. That, in the end, was what mattered. As for Patel, he went quiet. No posts, no interviews. His attorney issued a generic statement about misunderstandings and overstated interpretations, but no one paid it much attention. There was talk he might face charges. Maybe he would, maybe he wouldn't, but the damage wasn't in what happened to him. It was in what he exposed, that people in power still count on most folks not paying attention, still think no one will follow the paper trail, still assume that if you speak long enough, loud enough, and confidently enough, you can outrun the truth. But this time, the truth caught up. And it wasn't angry, it wasn't screaming, it just sat there, quiet, documented, time-stamped. In the White House, officials scrambled to distance themselves from Patel. He was never part of the inner circle, one senior aide told reporters off the record. He exaggerated his role. On Capitol Hill, both parties tried spinning the revelations to their advantage. Republicans pointed to procedural concerns about how the evidence was obtained. Democrats focused on a substance of what was revealed. But behind closed doors, members of both parties were checking their own digital footprints, deleting old texts, scrubbing accounts. If they got Patel, they could get anyone, one congressman was overheard saying to an aide. At the Department of Justice, a special team was quietly assembled to review the evidence and determine if criminal charges were warranted. Legal experts on television debated the distinctions between unethical behavior and illegal actions, between poor judgment and criminal intent. But in living rooms across America, those distinctions hardly mattered. What people saw was simple. Someone in power got caught, exposed, unmasked. The clip of Patel saying, "Deny knowledge unless you're backed into a corner," became a meme shared thousands of times with captions like, "Government transparency in action," and "This is why we don't trust them." 3 days after the hearing, Bondi held a press conference. She didn't gloat or grandstand. When asked about her methodical approach, she simply said, "The truth doesn't need theatrics. It just needs to be heard." For every Patel out there, there's someone like Bondi. And behind her, someone like Melinda. And behind both of them, whether in classrooms, homes, or scrolling through phones late at night, are people who still care enough to listen, ask, and press. That's where the real change starts. Not in shouting someone down, but in asking the question they thought you'd never dare to ask. A month later, 3 more officials resigned as the investigation widened. Text messages revealed a network of coordinated efforts to keep certain communications out of official channels. The playbook Patel mentioned turned out to be an actual document, a 12-page guide titled Communication Security Protocols that laid out exactly how to avoid oversight. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The very methods designed to hide information became the evidence that exposed everything. In her office, Bondi pinned a note to her bulletin board, a quote from Justice Louis Brandeis. "Sunlight is said to be the best of disinfectants." Next to it was a simple sticky note with the number 17, the number of additional officials now under investigation because of what started with one email, one text, one audio clip. So if this story made you think even just for a second about power, accountability, and truth in our democracy, subscribe to this channel, because we're not done watching, and we're definitely not done asking the questions that need to be asked. The powerful may think they're beyond reach, but as Kash Patel learned when Bondi pulled out those documents, no one is above the truth forever.